Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Connect's Town Hall. Today's topic is integration of technologies, and we're very excited to have our first town hall for the council. If you're not familiar with the council, we are a newly established council. We've been in operation for about 12 months, and we are a strategic council to the community, to the Connects, where we provide them consulting as it relates to technology adoption and technology of the industry. I want to introduce our audience and our panelists, and I want to start with Matt Race, who's going to be my partner in facilitating this discussion. Matt, welcome. If you would introduce yourself, tell us about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sal. Welcome everyone to this town hall. I'm looking forward to having some great dialogue and look forward to hearing your questions and talking about integration. A little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Facilities at the Scion Group. We are a student housing company here and based out of Chicago. We're the largest owner, operator, and maintain company for student housing with approximately 120 properties around the U.S. Very passionate about the facilities industry. Been in the facilities maintenance and management industry for approximately 30 years, having worked more so on the retail and commercial side for companies like Walgreens and Chipotle and Abercrombie and Fitch, just to name a few. So welcome everyone to the town hall. Look forward to hearing the questions and having some great dialogue throughout the course of our meeting.
Thanks. Awesome, thank you. Glad to have you, Matt. Next, I want to introduce Tyler with the REIT company. Tyler, please tell us about yourself, a little bit about the REIT and your involvement, guys, in the retail industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty excited for this. Similar to Matt, I have a lot of kind of joy and passion for all things facility management integration related. So I'm Tyler Higgins, managing director with a REIT. A REIT is a global management consulting firm based in Chicago, but I happen to be based in Los Angeles. Can't think I survived the Chicago winter, so can't stay there. And really our focus as a firm is really how to embed data technologies into the operational functions of retailers, hospital systems, and a few other industries such as financial services. And what I was excited about kind of this opportunity was, there's been a lot of evolution of integrations for specific components of facilities over the past 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And now it's really kind of all coming to a head where there's the chances for kind of global connectivity between facility interactions and so forth. So pretty excited for the topic and the discussion.
We're excited to hear from you too. Thank you, Tyler, for being here. Next, I want to also welcome Chris Darnell. Chris, please introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself and your company.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sal. My name's Chris Darnell. I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Real Estate with Curo Financial Technologies Corp. We are a fintech offering a diverse range of online, mobile, and branch-based consumer financial and loan services. Just over 400 retail locations and several offices and contact centers across North America. As for me, I started my facilities career in cinema operations, spending over 14 years with companies that are now part of the Regal Cinemas Group. Then spent the next decade in hotel development, including construction, management, facilities, and property improvements with Intercontinental Hotels Group before moving over to Curo, where I've been for the past 15 years. So happy everyone could join us and certainly looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. Tim Bernardez, welcome. Would you please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about JLL Technologies and Corrigo?
Yeah, happy to. Hello, everybody. Tim Bernardez, the head of global operations for JLL Technologies and leader for Corrigo. And basically what we do at JLLT is bring different technologies to the corporate real estate space through investors, occupiers, and owners. Very happy to be here and being part of the council.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for the audience as well. I want to give a quick recap as to how we chose the topic of integration and why is it important to be the first topic to talk about in our council. So when we started the council 12 months ago, we started doing some surveys and asking around, and we asked the participants, the members of the council, as to how they rank the technology adoption level within the facilities industry. And the feedback came back as we are average. We are not the best when it comes to technology adoptions and creativity. We are not the worst. We have some great ideas, but for some reason, we're slow in adopting technologies. And we uncovered multiple areas. Some of it is the lack of support from the C-suite, and that's because facility is not necessarily core business function or the main line of business in the companies that we support. But also, as we're going through this, we found that there's a lot of duplication and effort within the function of facilities and even within any function. And also, there are silos that creates risk within these functions. And in order to tackle these silos, you have to integrate with their processes, even on a mission and vision level, but also on technology level. So the topic of technology integration kept coming up for probably good 6 months. So we did multiple initiatives at the council, from creating material and material to share on the website around integration, and also we did a couple of articles, and now this is the town hall to basically bring it all together. And the way we wanted to address this topic today is to invite strategically the right people. So we have both sides of the fence. We have the customer represented by Chris Darnell, and we have the suppliers represented by Tim, and both have done a lot of projects related to integrating technologies within facilities. And we thought to top it off, to give really good perspective of management level and strategic level and industry level, we talked with ERIT, and they were happy to participate. And the reason why we're excited to hear from ERIT is because they see the integration as it happens through multiple industries, multiple functional area within their clients, and also they actually know the integration problem vertically and horizontally. So with that said, I will pass this on to Tyler, and once we're done with the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A where you're welcome to share your questions on the screen, and we're going to have further discussions. Tyler, it's you.
Great. No, appreciate the introduction, Sal, and likewise. What we thought we'd do, just kind of from a broad perspective, is spend 10 minutes just on what's happening, what are the opportunities, and that can kind of set the stage for our discussion with Chris and Tim and Matt to kind of talk about what's happening in day-to-day life from integrations. So I always like to start presentations off with kind of a thesis. And in general, the way technology and data has driven today is we have the kind of opportunity to establish what used to be pretty siloed or pretty hesitant full investment on integrations. And now we have the ability to have a broad spectrum of fully integrated, connected aspects of all components of a facilities network. And what's interesting is when I kind of work across different industries, we start, you look at some industries and they're really far ahead, or some industries and they're really far behind, or even competitors in the same space on their kind of management level belief of, is facilities management, the integration of facilities and systems within our facilities, a competitive advantage for our business or not? And so my kind of belief is that it can be, that you can position integration within facilities management as a competitive advantage for your business. And there's substantial ROI there where you can drive efficient and effective management. And some of the questions that will follow will hopefully shed light on that as well. But kind of the decades of incremental outsourcing or little silos at a time, or just the technology lagged, has led to this fragmentation environment. And ultimately what needs to come from this is action. And so, as I kind of walk through the next couple slides, I want everybody to think about, here's the way our network could potentially be connected, and here's the action that needs to happen to help drive it forward. So, when I kind of talk to facility managers and even C-suite executives on their decision-making process, ultimately, I kind of phrased it in just 3 simple questions, right? When they want to explore, should they do specific integration? Should they explore specific functions and segments? And so the first one is, how is the decision made? What's the ultimate criteria? And what's the plan that's going to drive that criteria? And a lot of times, it's kind of Sal even talked about in his opener, right? The planning aspect is always great, but really you need to understand how can a decision be made, and ultimately what's the criteria to make that. If it requires capital investment, what is the hesitancy for it? Is the ROI there? What's the time frame for that? And ultimately, convince leadership that facilities management can be a value prop and can be a differentiator for all organizations, no matter the industry. The next one is, I sort of just answered it, but is what is out there in the marketplace actually relevant to the business that you're running and operating? That's a question where if the leadership team has other priorities, what will make them compelled on the business case that's being presented to them to want to invest in integrations or want to explore a truly connected facility management environment? And frankly, I think the technology is there for almost all businesses and all organizations. I think the industries, no matter the industry you're in, the key driving components of your facilities management has the back-end technology and data that can help drive it. And then probably the most important one, everybody's day jobs. So how do we create time on enhancing these integrations? And really it requires full organizational commitment that they want to be innovators and they want to drive facility management forward. And ultimately what I'm going to talk about over the next couple slides, and we'll talk about in the question, is why that's really worth doing. What's really the driving force behind it, and why I think that's a strategic move for lots of organizations to drive. So things to consider from just an investment standpoint, I pulled just some metrics. There's going to be 10% compound annual growth rate in investment within facility management integration over the next 4 to 5 years, right? So you're talking 50, 60, 70 billion dollars in investment into this space, which means the technology is there and it's only going to continue getting better. And a lot of this growth is attributed to how you can further integrate systems, and then ultimately how can you drive intelligence software to help drive decision making. So ultimately in the past, sure, you had a really powerful building management system, but that only provided so much capabilities. Now you're able to process the data that's coming from that to ultimately make smarter decisions and faster decisions. So in simple terms, what is the opportunity, right? There's a huge migration of investment into cloud platforms, cloud technologies that are cross-system to help you drive decision-making. There's ability to have complete integrations, even of disparate systems that can all come together where decision-making can be made. Sure, a lot of the systems can be a little bit clunky at times, but there have been stopgaps to fix that, or even wholesale changes to fix that, to ultimately drive a full, complete integration. And then 99 out of 100 facility management integration projects do have positive and strong ROIs, be it for the efficiency of labor, true hard dollar P&L cost savings, or even for kind of streamlining a workforce. And you're seeing this not just in facilities management, but really in any component of interaction within an organization, right? We'll take retail as an example. Facility management integration is one component, but you take on is how a store operates from the day-to-day work of the customers coming in and out and the labor that's required. There's a ton of investment into how that interaction and those integrations work. That directly mirrors almost how a facility management integration can work as well, where the same efficiencies that are gained are there, and the ROI is there to help justify the purpose and the goal. I'm sure these are not obstacles that I think leadership investment, leadership prioritization is always a challenge with the facility management function. Over the last couple of years, I think it's been elevated, and a lot of the investments are starting to be noticed, and the ROI is there. But I think that's always going to be a challenge for any functional unit that's not necessarily impacting your top line growth. The second one is legacy systems are challenging, right? They're hard to untangle, they're hard to understand, and it really does take, right? You can't just put your toe in the water for this type of work. A lot of times you really have to do, have a 1, 2, 3 year investment plan to help untangle those systems and drive positive outcomes. We work with a lot of organizations where, they're kind of stuck between having half legacy systems, one really powerful system, and then a bunch of gaps. And ultimately where they struggle is what is the roadmap to get from the past to the future and not just always be behind, like they're constantly catching up, right? If you take a disparate system one at a time, you're just continually upgrading and driving more integrations in it, you're always going to be a couple systems or a couple years behind. And the last one, obviously, cybersecurity is obviously a huge void. The more you integrate, the more you drive technology in your business, the more it is opened up to issues, from a cyber and malware standpoint. And so there's always something to keep in mind, and that's where really the relationship between facility management teams and IT teams is really powerful to help drive the successful output of many integrations. So what can be integrated? I'm not going to go through all of these. I mostly just list them out because I think it's everything, right? From the really easy ones that a lot of people have done, from their building management, building maintenance, energy management, space management, your lighting, HVAC, every type of trade. I think most people understand how they can be integrated. Some of the integration in the sense of it's just under management and understanding, but really where can that be taken forward, right? How can you drive more prediction into it, more analytics into it? How can you start addressing some of the soft areas of facilities management, or some of the things that are heavily predicated with third parties and that are kind of tried and true trades? How can you ultimately drive more facility management technology integration into all aspects of your facility? So the things that are top of mind, that I've limited to just 6, not to jump through a bunch of them. And some of these are kind of buzzwords, but I'll sum them up in just a couple of pieces. So obviously the connectivity of devices and connectivity of machines has been a really prevalent topic for probably the last 10 years in this whole Internet of Things environment. Well, I think that's finally now, over the last 2 years and 3 years especially, taken a step forward where the technology has gotten cheap enough that it can actually be leveraged kind of across industry and cross size of organization. And the output of the information is there to be more actionable. So really, I think the Internet of Things at one end and the integrated sensors at the other end, they're really combined around the middle too of how can you have more intelligent facilities and how can you have more programmatic decision making. So I think as integrations are occurring across all 15 of these sub buckets, and there's probably even more, what's really happening now is what can you pull from these powerful integrations that can allow predictive maintenance, predictive decision making, powerful outputs of decision making. How can you actually believe the data as you're seeing it, right? We work with quite a few organizations where you ask the question to 3 different groups, you get 3 different answers. On what their preventive maintenance plan is. To the facilities group is one thing. To kind of a retail, a store operations group might look differently. To an IT team might look totally differently, and they all sort of have different impressions of what that means, what's the driving data behind it, what's the cost behind it. So really having a universal connected integration is also key to having a foundational element of believable data and believable decisions that you can drive. And so what are some specific examples? So I just pulled out a couple that are top of mind with at least the clients that we've been talking with recently. So one is really around predictive maintenance. I'll actually use a trucking company as an example. We've worked with a bunch of large over-the-road trucking companies, and they historically, it's not directly facilities management, but the way they're using similar data is how can they understand the maintenance that needs to happen to a truck? And they're building predictive maintenance plans to know exactly when something might break down based on all their historical data. That same model now really applies to large banks, large retailers, large corporations with many offices that can start saying, okay, we have a really strong, not just preventative maintenance plan, but really predictive maintenance plan, right? It sort of fits perfectly between your standard preventative plan and your break fix extremes. And this sort of smart predictive maintenance is really being driven on having enough powerful data coming from integrated systems that allow you to continue getting better and better in decision makings to be up to the minute. So that way you're not basing this year's plan on last year's data. You're really basing today's plan on today's most powerful information. And that really ties to the next one around smart decision making, right? And something that Sal and I talked a lot about is, there's a lot of anomalies that occur across organizations. How do you know which ones to respond to, what not to respond to? How do you know what your system is telling you is important and not important? And ultimately, systems are great at giving you the tools and the ideas of, okay, this is an issue or not an issue. But what they've struggled at is really being smart behind it. How can you rank and file things? How do you understand the cost implications of making a decision or not making a decision? How do you understand the customer experience decision by saying yes or no to certain maintenance decisions? So ultimately, you want all of this to be intuitive so much in a machine. And those machines really are stemming from the back of integrating significant portions of your facility management organization. Sensor technology has finally gotten to a price point where it's actually usable and useful for almost all organizations. You know, there's the simple side of sensor technology, like lights turning on and off. And then there's more interesting ones now around, can you put occupancy sensors into buildings so you know what areas have actually been used, what areas haven't been used. And as the workforce continues to change coming out of the pandemic, you know, occupancy sensors are going to be a huge investment for people who want to really have a streamlined structure of their office buildings or their space and really maximize space utilization. Really easy area for ROIs to tie directly to, but also something that's pretty interesting and innovative as now the whole workforce work dynamic is changing drastically. I think fragmented data is a huge challenge and continues to be a huge challenge. And so it's really spending time to invest a partnership between facility management teams, IT teams, and operations teams to have a true trustworthy data warehouse that you can draw upon and be able to say, okay, we have all certain amount of our organization has strong facility integration and the data that comes behind it. Now let's make sure that is compiled with all of the other operational and actionable data we have across our organization to drive it. And it's something I was actually reading about this last week and talking to someone earlier today about this on how they're going to use drones to manage reviewing roofs and reviewing HVAC units and things like that, and trying to help automate job walks through use of drones. I haven't seen that heavily prevalent today, but I thought it was something interesting, so I wanted to share it just because it's something that will obviously is going to happen over the next couple of years. So it's something to always raise a flag up for how can that be deemed a competitive advantage for our organization. And so kind of looking at where it's going forward, you know, a lot of this technology has been around for a long time, right? A lot of the big facility management integrators have been around for a long time. The opportunities have been there. Why haven't they happened, right? A lot of times it's because organizations are satisfied with what they have and don't view facilities management as a differentiator, as a value proposition for their firm. Well, what we're starting to see is in the past, it wasn't needed to do investment here. All you need to do is stand a building up and hope it runs. Well, now that's being used out of being a service provider to really being an actionable data center, right? You're able to leverage data, drive efficiencies, and continue getting better around your facility, something that people didn't believe was possible in years past. The other part, and I talked a lot about this, facilities used to be a cost center. Now it's really a strategic advantage for organizations. You're able to really position your ability to manage your facility, depending if it's a retailer that we talk to, banks, corporations. You're able to kind of use your facilities management potential to be a strategic advantage for your organization, both in, you know, what your customer targets look like, as well as your own workforce. And then obviously inflation is here and it's going to continue setting a platform where costs are rising, right? Labor costs are going up, materials costs are going up. Frankly, facilities costs is going to be a rising line item. So it's going to set a platform where that line is going up. What can be done to help mitigate that cost increases or ultimately turn the curve the other way and start making it go down? So I think as much as inflation is always a challenge in this environment, it also creates a platform for facility management to have a stage front center to say, we can actually help mitigate these and ultimately support our margin growth or whatever it might be for your organization. So before we go to the Q&A, just wanted to finish with, you know, a few quick notes, right? How to get started. I think the biggest thing is you have to say yes, right? I think you have to take action and you have to start thinking, where do we start? ROI is always the easiest justification for leadership teams. When we talk with big organizations, it's heavily predicated on what is our return the fastest? Where should we invest our first dollar? And so it's really getting an understanding of what systems need to be modernized, but also what modernization happens first that can drive a positive ROI. The second one is really what can impact either your workforce positively. Obviously, with the pandemic, safety is a huge on the front mind of a lot of leaders, safety or your customers, right? If you were able to kind of build a story around those components, it will get the voice of leadership and ultimately get the dollars that need to invest. And the biggest piece is kind of the end, right? Having patience, being able to say, okay, we have a 3-year plan, not a 3-week plan. And really saying, we know where we're going to have to get to over time. Let's bite off what we can chew to start with and ultimately make that action and drive it forward. So that's kind of just what I wanted to hit on before we walk into the discussion. But it's an exciting space and there's a lot happening. So hopefully just over a couple slides, we're able to kind of set the stage for really what's happening in the landscape.
Thank you so much, Tyler. You've covered a lot, and certainly different pieces here and there I would like to talk about. But one thing you mentioned is really identify where to start with, and that's one thing I wanted to start the discussion with, and it's a question for everyone. When we're running day to day, I view integration is a solution for silos. And typically, the status of the industry is if we have a silo in our operation, especially if I'm on the customer side, Chris, the standard solution is we throw more hours to it. We ask someone to take care of this process manually. And then it becomes just natural to us to do that process manually. We don't think how much it's costing us or what additional risks it's bringing to us. And the topic or the option of integration does not come to mind. So the question is, where do we draw the line between this is naturally and it's okay to do this process manually versus let's start thinking about integration? Do you have any tips or thoughts on where do we identify integration possibilities?
I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would ever. I have a standard definition, but to your point, and to use risk overusing a cliche, it's always a matter of how do I work smarter, not harder. It's easy to throw people at problems. The problem with throwing people at problems is how do you define what they do? And as things get easier to do over time, have you just created a team that's now oversized and now you've got to lay people off? My preference is always to run as lean as I possibly can and find ways to work smarter, not harder. So the first question should always be, how can I automate this? How can I integrate this? Is it possible? And if so, let's do that. Let's work on doing that as opposed to just throwing people at a problem and hoping that it works.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris. If you look at your business and you think about the movement primarily of data between applications or sensors or smart equipment, that should all be automated. And what we see when we go out into the industry is we see swivel chairing, extremely inefficient. It brings risk to the business. It fragments your data. It's reliant on a human being spending valuable time doing something that could be done through automation. And if you think about integration, that's really what it is. It's taking, most of the time, relatively simple transactions that we rely on an expensive person to do, and changing that to being done through APIs or different forms of integrations. And a lot of times what I would say is it's not necessarily that then that person doesn't have a place in the organization. It's that they're can now focus on more complicated, higher value add components of the business. So, take all the simple stuff and just make it work. And then take your skills, right, your people, your talent, and focus them on the things that really drive either client satisfaction or tenant guest satisfaction, better overall operating. The two of those together really lift kind of the overall value that's being generated by the company.
I agree. I hate to think about it in terms of human versus automation, because integration does have to do also with mitigation of risks. So think about integration between CMMS, let's say, and BMS. It can be used in a manner where the BMS is the QA tool to validate that some kind of a repair took place in the field. So if you integrate your HVAC with CMMS, when a work order is complete, you can run triage tests on the sensors to see that the work actually has been complete, or PM has been completed, preventative maintenance has been completed. So it has to do with, and some of these things cannot be done by people normally. or but not by the standard type of skills that we have in our staff. So it's great to think about integration as not just a way to reduce hours, but also to mitigate risk. So with that said, let's say we identify an issue or a gap, and we want to put a project around it. How do we quantify that? How do we really come up with a real business case that we can take to our business partners and try to get it funded and approved?
Well, I think from, once the problem's been identified, obviously you can sit down with your team and outline a plan, but for any plan to be successful, you've got to have a champion. And you've got to put somebody in charge of it that really owns it. You can't just say, let's integrate this and make it happen and hope that it works. So you've got to have somebody that's really leading the charge, but every opportunity is going to be a little different. It's hard to say here's the template for it, because every problem is going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to sit down and outline the specific problem and create those milestones that you want to reach, and have somebody driving the charge to get things done. But back to the ROI issue, does it make sense? Is it something that you can do that's going to save time or money? And if the answer is yes, then it's probably worth the time to dig into it and put that plan together.
So I have a question.
I would just add two things real quick. I always think of it, talking with people like Chris or even leadership organization, the biggest priority is always, who is it going to impact the best, right? Is it going to impact our own people, our customers, our delivery of product? Who's it going to impact? And if you can sort of say it's going to drastically improve the influence for someone, and there's an ROI that can help take you there, then you can start building the story and priorities from the ground up. But I think you understand kind of the end game on what's the influence going to be, then you can kind of put the building blocks in order to get to the end.
So I have a question for the panel. As a end user myself, have working on the retail and commercial side, some of the challenge I have run into the past is not identifying or not knowing what's out there in the industry. So, right, we have blinders on, we know what's in front of us, we know what's worked in the past, but sometimes with the ever evolving technology, there's so much out there that we don't get exposed to it, right? So how do we find out about it? So I'd like to throw this to the panel, and for those that are on the attendees, how, if you're the end user, how do you find new technology? And if you are the supplier of the technology, how do you get in front of your customer to present, to make them aware that there's a technology out there for them, for which they should be integrating to?
Yeah, I would say, I would say, Matt, like one of the best way, in my opinion, is to find business partners who come in and work with you. And I would say not to figure out what to sell you. You can figure that that happens right away. You have someone that sits down and understands 80% of what could be automated is happening this way in your particular, setup. You can use sensors in a meaningful way. And I agree with Tyler, the cost of sensors are coming down dramatically. They're finally at a price point that, and an ease of installation that you can use them, right? And really understand, like, how do I, usually what happens is there are 2 or 3 things that automate about 80% of your business. Focus on that, right? And they'll know the right technologies, they'll know the right sensors, they'll know all of those things, and maybe get 2. And just go through that education. I would say don't go try to do it yourself. There's a lot out there, but they can also then come back and really give you the hard data around, this is really what we see when we save. If we automate this, if I've got a motor and I have a sensor on it and I convert a reactive work order, an emergency work order to a preventative maintenance work order, the cost savings on that is large. So they can help you then understand and formulate the best way inside of your organization to prove the case, the technologies, and then just to simplify it for you. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, and Matt, I mean, it sounds simple, but Google is your friend. Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, but I'm always amazed at how much I can learn just by phrasing a few, questions on a search and going out there and start digging around. And I'll spend a few hours sometimes if I know I've got a problem and I don't know what the solution is. There's 2 things. There's searches on Google and there's your professional trade references. I mean, you reach out to the people that you know in the industry, your peers, and facility maintenance has always been a great group of people. They're always willing to help. You can reach out and talk to people and ask questions. Chances are there's somebody out there that knows something about what you're struggling with. And that may be all it takes, just a little tidbit of information that points you in the right direction and gets you searching for the right information. And you can uncover what you're looking for just with a little legwork.
But I agree with Matt. I feel like having a successful integration project within one organization where, let's say, one vendor or two vendors participated in, it seems like typically with these three stakeholders, the customer, the two vendors, the customer is the one who highlights this initiative. And I feel like there's not enough promotion on the vendor side to celebrate, hey, we did integration with our other vendor in the market and maybe even competitor in order to help this customer. I feel there's not enough nice stories like this that are being told in the industry. And if we have some more of these highlights that are coming on a regular basis, I think one, it will bring awareness to the audience, to the customers, that hey, these different vendors do play together, and they do that because they want to help us. So we're the center of this initiative, and this is an option where I don't have to do things manually. These guys can automate it. So I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I do feel like the industry and the supplier side should celebrate these projects in public more often.
Yeah, I would add one note to that. I mean, I think in general, it's easy to find like the 5 to 10 big players in the space. I think what's hard to find is like the tail. And I would agree. I mean, a lot of those vendors are not, one, they don't spend the money to show up on Google results, or they just don't have enough use cases that it's out there where everybody knows, what their niche is or what the problem they're really solving. So, I mean, that's something I think is a valid problem, Sal, but I think as this space gets more and more attention and more innovation occurring, you would hope that evolves and changes.
Yeah, and so I would say to your question as well, I know many examples where it's the customer's strategy to bifurcate their portfolio with 2 or 3 different providers of, maintenance or IFM, and through integrations manage that simply. So there, I think to your point, it may not appear like that happens, but it happens a lot in the industry. On the upper end of the larger accounts that are out there, it's a pretty common practice.
Here's one other thoughts that comes to mind around how vendors work or approach integrations. And you correct me if I'm wrong, but my observation is vendors, especially when it comes to technology vendors, they don't promote a solution or an integration unless it's being asked for by a customer, because there's no business need for it, even though it may be a great idea, but you're the one who thought of it and the customer did not think of it. And you don't promote it as this new capability that we can do unless a specific customer asks for it. But what if we have the cycle start from the other side? Do you think that's a valid theory here, that vendors should think about how can they integrate systems with other vendors so that the customer is actually getting better experience? Do you think that's a possibility or a valid point?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a real business opportunity for companies specializing maybe in integrations. I mean, most companies sell what they sell. They sell their product, and you see most companies promoting open APIs now, and that's dangerous. It sounds great on the surface, but I don't know how many people have tried to set up an open API. It's not as simple as it sounds. And you typically need help with that. And the companies that promote APIs are not typically the ones that can help with that. They can provide the API, but you've got to go out and get somebody else to help you make that connection or write that code. It's pretty code intensive when you get into the APIs.
So, a question for the panel again, as once you've identified, you've Googled, you've networked, you found all these platforms, this technology of varied sorts, either security, CMMS, BAS, whatever. So you found what you want, right? You have this bucket of software. You found the integrator that's going to tie it all together. Give me examples, or give the audience examples, both on the partner side, but also on the consumer side, the business case. How do you communicate? How do you work with your C-suite to get the budget approved, to get all that tied together?
From my point of view, it really does come back to ROI when you're talking to the C-suite. It's ROI, or it's safety and security. It's, some things that you can apply that they want to hear, reduction of liability. You've got to focus on those things. They're not interested in the details of how you're going to make that thing work. They want to know what it's going to save the company, or how it's going to improve the work experience, or help them recruit new talent, or whatever the case may be. It's what's the bottom line. So you've got to focus on that bottom line as to what makes the project worthwhile before you really take it upstairs.
And from the partner side, how do you provide that data? How do you work with the end user, the consumer, to help provide them the data to build that case for the C-suite?
Yeah, so usually at the C-suite level, it's an outcome conversation, right? To Chris's point, it's not about the how. It's like, tell me what am I getting for this, right? And for a long time, so the partner or by yourself, simplify the message down to the core. We need to integrate because it's going to drive. And in post-COVID world, this is very relevant. I think it was actually harder pre-COVID to sell the integration story, but post-COVID, it is safety. It's a real thing. Through the integrations, you can ensure guest, employee safety at levels that you couldn't before, especially if you add in sensors, knowing how many times somebody's been in a room. Has this bucket moved across the room? Do I need to ensure that somebody comes, cleans? All of those things can be integrated. So it is about safety. It's also about de-risking your business from a standpoint of disparate systems passing information back and forth. And I think the third is simply, in this new world, you can dramatically increase your employee or guest experience through integrations. And then, so you have these outcomes: better guest experience, better employee experience, more safety, right? We're going to de-risk our business by the fact that we have tied our systems together in a meaningful way. We have all sorts of tangible data that now we can use for insights instead of just buckets of data. Then talk about the ROI. And believe it or not, we're also going to save X%. And I think the best way is to just talk in real terms. Every time we prevent this from happening, it saves us this many dollars. Because once you start aggregating dollars together, I see C-suites go, everybody comes in and tells me they're going to save 20%. But if you can say, I'm going to convert, 20% of our emergency work orders through sensors to a simple reactive or preventative work order, they know how much that costs. Okay, so if we do that X many times, this is a no-brainer. So I think it's that type of message that resounds in the C-suite.
Yeah, the one piece, since I primarily are connecting the two sides, like connecting Tim's and Chris's of the world, that they're both spot on. Right? It's simplifying the message, and then ultimately, in the past, it was facility management and different integrations. It's not going to be a top 4 priority of any C-suite executive, but safety might be, or whatever other those. Figure out what the priorities are, and frame your story around the priorities that exist. And that's the easiest way to get yes on your priorities.
Awesome. So one question also comes up from C-suites a lot is, okay, you convinced me with the ROI. What can go wrong? So you're talking about integrating. We're talking, especially with the retail, you're talking IT, you're talking security, cybersecurity, you're talking potentially access into customer information. How prepared are you to actually get this project completed without any risks? What things we should account for and think about and plan for?
Almost everything can go wrong. I'm a plan B guy. You better have a backup plan because you're going to need it somewhere along the road. Resources may leave, costs may increase through inflation, systems may break, and if you're totally reliant on a single system, that's a problem if it's going to cause shutdowns. So you better have a plan B. You always have to build that into the project as you're working your way through it. Because if you're totally reliant on a single solution, it has a real a real possibility for disaster.
So it sounds to me like if I were to put it in steps, step one is identify the gap or the silo, identify the problem that Tim was talking about that you will solve through integration. Then you want to partner with the right team players. That would be, in a lot of cases, IT and network, maybe other functional area within your organization, plus vendors. So you have to have the plan together, you have the discussion together, the scope of work. Then after that, you go to C-suite. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would
Yeah, I
agree.
mean,
So
once you're ready to kick things off, yeah, you've got to have the budget. So you've got to have their blessing to get the dollars you need to get started.
Okay, so question for you, Tim, on the supplier side. I know in many scenarios, suppliers would not work on a project before they have it, before there's a budget associated with it. Would you feel like this is accurate or inaccurate in most cases? We're not talking about specifically your company, but in general, do vendors work with individuals within the FM facilities in order to propose a project that may get approved or may not get approved?
absolutely, it happens all the time. Because we understand the fact that investment in time is required. It is a partnership, and sometimes the answer works your way, and sometimes it doesn't. When I think I also just on the risk side, if somebody as a partner is coming to you and telling you, "Don't worry, it'll just go smooth," you probably ought to think again, because that's the wrong answer. The biggest thing we find is, if there are IT brothers and sisters on the call, they're usually strapped, and it's really hard to get the IT team's attention. Your priority 27, of 50. So what we found is you have to have a very clear scope to start, because scope creep is always a risk. But the other is you need an internal executive champion that can break through the silos that usually exist within a company, who, when you start to get the friction or the resistance or the deprioritization, they can come over the top and go, "No, this is a priority and we're going to make this happen." And it's something that everybody should be very transparent about the need for, again, depending on the size of your company. The bigger you get, the more of a reality is that you end up in kind of functional silos.
I would just add one note that, biggest thing is don't have blinders on when you go into it. I think vendors, because a consulting firm, are always happy to help build the business case, because that's ultimately the work you want to do. But from the risk side, it's just, if you go in with blinders on and don't communicate resource needs, budget needs, anything like that, get out in front of all the risks early on. And even the fact that, things could break, but you have the right contingency plans to, mitigate those as much as possible. I mean, we see a huge risk always being, you have the right resources on day one, but by day 90, the resources are pulled elsewhere, and now all of a sudden your timeline is extended by years. And ultimately, everybody keeps asking, "Where's my ROI? Where's the benefit out of this? What have you been doing for the last 3 months?" And so it's really having commitment and understanding what the resource needs and capital needs might be from the outset.
So we've identified the different types of software out there. We've identified the integrators. We've sold it to the C-suite. Now we're talking about the integration. Let's close the loop on it. So once the project's been completed, the results are starting to come in. Who owns that, right? So you've worked with these different platforms. You have an integrator. You have the end user. Data's flowing. Who's monitoring the checks and balances? Who's maintaining the updates? Who's checking that the updates for the different software don't impact each other? Give me an example from the panel where you've seen this, some trials and tribulations, and how have you worked through those?
So I would say the answer depends on the integration based on what we've seen, but I don't know that it's fair to say that an integration is ever truly completed. And what I mean by that is you'll integrate something, but one system may upgrade and now the integration's broken, or the other system may upgrade a week later and now the integration's broken again, or the hardware may fail and now that hardware is not available any longer and it has to be replaced with some other piece. I mean, it's an ongoing project and you have to treat it as such. I think once you've started it, if you want to keep it in place, it requires maintenance just like anything else. You don't just turn it on and forget it. So maintenance of that integration is part of the project. Who takes responsibility for it? And that answer varies. In some cases, it may be maybe you can convince a member of your IT team to keep an eye on something that has to run in the background, and maybe it's not them. Maybe it's a simple file transfer and somebody in the facilities team can keep an eye on it, or one of the other teams can watch it or check it on a daily or weekly basis, or however often it needs to occur. But it is an ongoing issue.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Chris. There's not a single answer to that question due to the different types of integrations and organizational structures. An integrator or business partner, if you don't have like a PMO office or someone that runs projects inside your company, which I say if you do, grab one and have them run this as a project because it's the best way to do it. If you don't, your partner probably does. And then just make sure you have the right expectations around how they're going to help you work through the different groups. But it needs, one of the risks or where we see failure when it happens, when I say failure, is almost all integrations end up happening. It's how bumpy is it along the way, is when everybody is doing it off the side of their desk. If it's an off the side of your desk type of feel inside your company, it's going to be bumpier. If somebody gets up every day and helps get this 90-day integration done in 90 days inside of your company, it will go much smoother.
Yeah, and this is not meant to be a knock against IT departments. Tim mentioned it earlier, and he's exactly right. IT departments are swamped. If you go into an integration, at least in my experience, and you're expecting your IT department to make this integration project of yours their top priority, you're likely destined to fail. Yeah. The IT team, in my opinion, is a resource, but they're not the manager. They're not the ones whose lap you dump this in and expect it to work. You're going to need their participation, but having that project manager that Tim mentioned, having somebody else that you could potentially outsource that work to, maybe some of that IT or technical work to, that can use your IT department as a resource to do specific tasks. In my experience, that's how we've seen a better chance of success.
And that's one thing I've seen in previous lives, where now that you've implemented, things are going well, you have the integrator, things are moving, as they should. But now in the ever evolving world of facilities, we're doing more with less. So from a validation standpoint, who's measuring the success and monitoring the ROI and providing that information to the C-suite?
If you want the honest answer, no one, typically. And I don't mean that to mean you should go out and waste money on projects, but if you did your homework up front and that integration's working, chances are you're not going to sit there and study it over and over and over again, week after week after week. At some point, you're going to look at it and say, okay, it's working. It's doing what we thought it was going to do. We're happy with it. We're moving on to the next project. But I mean, speaking personally, I don't dedicate resources to just monitoring the effectiveness. We watch integrations, or we watch things that we've put in place to make sure that they're working and doing what they were intended to do. And in some cases, we kill integrations down the road because they're no longer needed, or aren't doing what they're needed to do, and something else has come along. Technology is technology; it changes. So, but I don't dedicate a ton of resources to just constantly monitoring the long-term result, to put it that way.
Yeah, I think you only monitor it if it's not working.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
If it's working, and by day 90 it's up and running and it feels like it's adding the value you want it to, you sort of it becomes normal course of business.
Yeah,
I agree with Chris there for sure.
Well, gentlemen, I'm incredibly honored to have facilitated with Matt this discussion. Thank you for being with us. It's 3:25, and I want to ask Meg to give us some updates about the council and a few things to the audience. But again, thank you so much. It's an honor, and we're looking forward to our upcoming town hall in the first quarter of 2022.
Thanks, Sal.
Thank you.
Meg, I think you're on mute.
Meg?
Sorry. Thank you, everybody. I am excited to share a quick update with a few minutes left on the ConnexFM Technology Council. So we have, and if you caught our daily grind this week, we gave an update on how the council has fared over the last year. So one of our first steps was to add members to our council. So we are now staffed on the Technology Council by our great group of volunteers. We have our 5 supplier partners and some who are on the call today. We have our multi-site members, 8 different members giving their expertise. And thank you so much to Chris, who was able to join us as well. And as always, please continue this conversation in the Connex communities. This is an awesome conversation, and we hope to have even more further of it. I know we didn't get to answer very many questions today, but this is the chance to get this group again. So I will be posting this in the community, and please continue the conversation. We also wanted to share another item that the council has been working on, and this is our technology resource center. So this is going to be a different, right now there's 9 different modules in the technology resource center, and each different section includes a quick introduction to the area, and the council will actually be asking for case studies and return on investment opportunities to showcase the different technologies. And so this will be launching very soon. And so we just wanted to showcase this beta site to the community today, as well as give you a sneak peek to know that we will have a form shortly to collect case studies for this site. But we thank everyone for joining today. And if there's any questions, as I said, we're going to continue it on the community. Gentlemen, do we have any last words?
No, I'd like to thank the panel for participating. And I think this was a great conversation, and looking further to additional dialogue. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good one.
Great to see everyone.
Thank you.